Coming up on this edition of Cincinnati Connection, with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day closing and approaching Black History Month, how race relations are in America and what would Dr. King have to say about it all. Another major marketing snafu, this time by clothing retailer H&M. So where did they go wrong here and how can they reverse the damage? More importantly, how do they get Black consumers back on board with the H&M brand? And I'm keeping my eye on the DACA fight in Congress. If a deal isn't reached, we could see the government shut down. Will we get to that point? I'm Sharice Gibson. Cincinnati Connection starts right now.
Now, Cincinnati Connection, connecting you to your community.
And we will not stop until racism ends and we all are treated equally as God created all of us as equal women and men.
Earlier this week, hundreds gathered for an annual commemorative march celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and those around the world to do, as they do every year, we take a look back at his influence. And while some muddy their timelines with some of Dr. King's most memorable quotes and speeches and pictures, others look at his legacy and his radical vision, one that included universal health care and education and equal pay and voting rights. And some historians would even go as far to call Dr. King a socialist. And Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th of 1968 before he would have had the opportunity to see change in America. But if he hadn't been assassinated, what would Dr. King have to say today about the state of America, about the state of race relations, about the Trump presidency? Would Dr. King have the same influence today that he did during the civil rights movement? So joining me this morning is Cincinnati Enquirer race and community reporter Mark. Mark, you have to say your last name for me. Is it Cornett? I'm saying it right. Canute. I get it right. Okay, to talk about what MLK would think about the state of America today. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. So let's talk about the controversial last couple of years that a lot of people don't exactly get an opportunity to talk about when we talk about Dr. King. Most of us recognize him for his nonviolent movement, his speeches, the of course powerful "I Have a Dream" speech, but not so many discuss the last couple of maybe 3 or 4 years of his life when he really kind of made that switch towards activism towards the end of his life. So what would America be today if Dr. King had lived?
That's a great question, and there's books written about this, and Dr. King himself forecast kind of a warning shot in his last book in 1967, Where Do We Go From Here? And as you said, in the last 3 years of his life after the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, he did expand a great deal. He had started the Poor People's Campaign, which included an attempt to end poverty for all Americans, not just those of color, but for Appalachians and white America. And he was scorned. There were people, other African-American leadership at the time that said he had gone too far, that the battle, there was a lot of white backlash, that the battle had been won, you achieved what you had wanted, which was voting and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So really in those last few years of his life, he had, while we look back and see his significance, in his real time of the last few years, and especially after he came out so strongly in condemnation of the Vietnam War, a lot of people wrote him off.
If you were alive today, a quick question. You know that race relations in America right now, we're in some tense times. What do you think he would have to say about the state of race relations in America in 2017, well, 2018 now?
He was probably too much of a gentleman to say, "I told you so." Yeah. But I think there would be an element of that, and again, not to throw too many book titles at you, but there's a fascinating book written by sociologist Michael Eric Dyson that called April 4th, 1968, and it was published in 2008 at the 40th anniversary of his assassination. And in it, Mr. Dyson does a kind of a fictitious interview with Dr. King, where Dr. King does talk about the disparity, the economic disparity that not only affects the African-American community, but also white people and Latinos. And he forecast and predicted, the racial, the religious issues we're having, Islamophobia, and some of the rise of the white nationalism and the issues with some of the Christian communities that are built on white supremacy. So he saw what could have happened had we not made corrective actions in the late 60s, when his thesis was for once in this world, we had the technology and the resources to change things dramatically in terms of poverty and of racial harmony.
Now, when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement that is very active right now, we all know that Dr. King had a certain approach to the civil rights movement. We had Malcolm X, both of the men, obviously, two vastly different approaches, but they had a mutual respect for each other. Do you think that Martin Luther King would approve of that movement?
I think he would, because for the most part, if you study not just the Black Lives Matter movement in Cincinnati, but it's a largely autonomous organization, city to city.
Yes.
And if you look at it, it is nonviolent. Mm-hmm. It has been historically nonviolent for its 5 or 6 years of existence. And discussions have come up, though, I know with the local organization, about should we defend ourselves? We're not seeking confrontation, but do we need to begin protecting ourselves? But I sense that Martin Luther King Jr. would approve of it. My study and my dealings with the Black Lives Matter group locally have been that it's very well thought out, it's very methodical, it's not kind of irrationally reactive, it's based on data, mm-hmm. It has a very tight focus and a very clear purpose. And I think Dr. King would applaud that intelligence to it.
All right, so we have about 45 seconds left, but do you think that just kind of shifting the way that we're going into 2018 when it comes to social activism, do you think that Dr. King would focus on the same things then that he focused on back then? Do you think that he would focus on the same social and political issues, or what do you think would be his #1 issue that he would tackle today?
I think he'd be horrified at the attempts to weaken the Voting Rights Act, which has been done in some areas of the country with states' rights and local rule. I think he was someone who understood the importance of the judiciary and of legal remedy to racism and inequality. And I think he'd be concerned, in addition to kind of the legislative pieces, he'd also be concerned about the judiciary as well, because he saw the importance of not just mobilization in the streets, but he also understood using the law and using the courts for justice.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a good time talking to you, Mr. Cornute. We'll be right back. So last year, there was major controversy with Dove soaps after a new ad that made an attempt to show some diversity, an attempted diversity rather. And the ad, women of different races took off shirts to show another woman. Well, that ad fell flat when underneath the black woman's shirt was a white woman. Now the latest controversy to hit social media and on air, frankly, it's the latest ad by H&M. So take a look at this. Tell me what you think about it. In the ad, you see right here a black boy wearing a sweatshirt that says "Coolest Monkey in the Jungle." A lot of people ask, well, where's the controversy here? So during the Jim Crow era, and even before that, racist images that depicted black children as monkeys with big lips were the norm. One of the most shocking for me was a black child in the same caricature being used as alligator bait. Now, those were the images that circulated. Those are the images that companies have shied away from. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, this image struck a chord in Black America today. So how do we prevent these things from happening? Joining us this morning is Crystal Kendrick. She's the founder of the Voice of Your Customer and the Voice of Black Cincinnati. Crystal, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so first of all, just, off the top of your head, what are your thoughts on the ad?
Well, I feel like many African Americans in our region, and not just African Americans. I mean, we've heard from quite a few non-African Americans who thought that this ad and many of the other ads that you've mentioned are racially and culturally insensitive. And so it is heartbreaking, but unfortunately, it is becoming par for the course. There's almost one a month. Mm-hmm. And these are major brands, major organizations with extensive marketing budgets and extensive marketing teams. Some of the best in the industry are leading these marketing efforts, but these things continue to happen. And hopefully they will take heed to what is happening and do more things to try to prevent those things from happening.
Okay, so like you mentioned, the controversy with this ad, the controversy with Dove soaps and several other companies that we've seen in the past. So what do you think companies are missing here when it comes to these sort of advertisements, or when it comes to marketing in general?
Well, most of these companies, while they have many things in common, such as large marketing budgets, extensive marketing teams, boards of directors, some diversity initiatives, unfortunately, the diversity is not inbred throughout the organization. Mm-hmm. It's not inbred throughout their contractors and vendors, their boards of directors, their staff. And so what you typically find is that people count, or organizations count, or even marketing departments count any diversity as a number, which is important. But you also must have diversity in the ranks of the organization. So if we're talking specifically about a marketing department, we can't just have the administrative assistant or the intern or the co-op or the tier 1 employees who bring the diversity and then not have any of the senior leaders be of diverse backgrounds. And so, you know, we really look at organizations to try to hire and promote and develop employees who are culturally relevant. I won't even say that they need to be African American. They need to be culturally relevant. And when you do that, you have different perspectives. If you don't have it within your staff, then you need to have it within your vendor bases. So if we're talking about marketing departments, unfortunately, many marketing organizations that have these very large contracts with these major corporations don't have the diversity throughout their organization as well. And so some of the best organizations are now requiring their vendors to have subcontracts with culturally relevant marketing firms or marketing firms that bring a higher level of diversity to their organization or to their team so that they can try to avoid some of these issues.
Now, do you think some people said that they didn't seem to understand the outrage? I just gave a quick explainer on it, and basically the history of it all. Do you think it's a matter of people just simply not understanding when they do get up to the point of being in the ranks and leading up a marketing team, or do we need to see more people of color taking these roles, and not just more people of color, but people who come from different economic backgrounds? You know, I said that when we talk about diversity, we see it so much as black and white, but are we not looking at the fact that we have some people who come from poor backgrounds and people who come from not Ivy League backgrounds, but maybe public and state colleges?
Oh, absolutely. So diversity is not, and that's why I said culturally relevant versus ethnically diverse. So sometimes they go hand in hand, but many times they do not. So you can have people who have cultural sensitivity and cultural training, and that includes not just race, but it includes socioeconomic status and background. It can include religious backgrounds. It can include immigrant versus non-immigrant. There's a lot of different things that happen, and anytime you visit a major city, especially along the coastlines, you'll see this diversity, and you're almost in a place where they don't see diversity because there's so much of it. But you know, there's another thing that people often say is that skin folk don't always equal kinfolk. So it's not just a matter of your race or ethnicity, it also is a matter of your experiences. Right? And so skin folk means that we're the same, but kinfolk means that we're the same. And so there's a difference in that. And hopefully these organizations are starting to realize the importance of not just having diversity at the lowest levels of the organization, but also having diversity at the higher levels of organization, not just in race and ethnicity, but also in age. Because fortunately or unfortunately, many of the recent college graduates may not understand the monkey in the jungle statement because they didn't have those experiences. Our families have protected us in so many ways so that we could live in different backgrounds, but the people who are buying are really important. And we need to be sure that we have people who are buying our products represented on our marketing teams.
You know, so we've seen different protests happening mostly over in South Africa. They trashed an H&M store. We have some video here from The Guardian showing where those protests were happening. Can H&M bounce back from this? Because now we've seen The Weeknd, several artists, musicians that are separating themselves from the company. How do you fix this moving forward?
Well, to me right now, they're in a crisis mode. And so they need to talk to crisis experts to calm the noise and really explain what their steps are going to be moving forward. So that would be number one. But number two, they have got to commit to having a more diverse organization. I believe H&M is headquartered outside of the United States. I believe it's Sweden. And you know, diversity in Sweden is very different than diversity in America, which could be different than diversity in Africa. And so I really believe that they need to ensure that their marketing team from branding, product development, advertising, all of those people have a global representation on their team. So while they may be based in Sweden, I know that the United States has a very large portion of their sales, as does many of the African nations or wherever they may be. So I really believe that they need to be sure that they have a team of advisors or advocates who really are ingrained in the markets to whom they are selling. It's not just a matter of a celebrity wearing their clothes to sell the product. You know, younger people especially are much more interested in your cultural relevance and your philanthropy and your give back and your ability to engage people in the workplace. And so I just really believe that the team at H&M needs to ensure that they have far greater diversity in their teams going forward. They really do, from the board of directors to the marketing team, to the senior leadership of the organization, to their vendors and vendor base, as well as, you know, many of these products are tested through focus groups and surveys, and unfortunately, these teams of people from whom they're gathering input don't always represent their target audience.
Yeah, well, right now I know that they're probably trying to fix this, like I said, crisis mode, trying to fix it in PR mode. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us, giving your thoughts on this one. We'll have more on this story on our website, fox19now.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Of course, I want to tell you what caught my attention here. I've been keeping my eye on the plan to fix DACA. I spoke with Dr. Ryan Salzman with the NKU Political Professor Department. Take a look. Always good to have you here. We've had this conversation before. President Trump sending out a series of tweets, placing all of the blame, as we just mentioned, on the Democrats, saying that they are not playing ball when it comes to DACA. But Democrats are saying that they won't fund, which we've heard them say this before. They will not fund the government unless it finds some sort of DACA fix. So both parties standing strong on exactly where they are. How likely is it that we will see this government shut down?
I think it's probably, let's say, about a 25% chance that we see the government shut down, with the most likely outcome being another short-term resolution. So we can have this conversation again in a month or 6 weeks. How's that sound, Sharice?
Yeah, that's not going to. You know, right now, it's like I said, the way that they're holding strong on what they're saying, and now we have the president, of course, coming back out saying he wants a funding for the border wall again. And we thought that we had a fix last year with Democrats.
So we did. And, you know, we probably all remember those optics. The Republicans were very much sort of up in arms because the president met with Schumer and Pelosi. They came out. They said they had this deal. Everybody was wide-eyed. I believe we came on here. I said, well, you know, we'll have to believe it when we see it. But that's put the Democrats in a very interesting position. One, they want to own this issue. They want, for principled reasons, but also because they need a victory. Now that we've had tax reform passed, that they piggyback the repeal of the individual mandate on that. The Democrats are eager for a victory. They know that they have the margins now that there's been the replacement of the senator in Alabama. So it's a 51-49 margin, so that they know that in the Senate, at least, they have even more leverage to work with. So the Democrats really want this to happen. And the last opportunity that they probably have to make this happen is this budget negotiation. So they're not going to go anywhere. And the comments by Mr. Trump that were reported, the alleged comments that he made last weekend about other countries that were somewhat disparaging, I think that that has even emboldened Democrats to try to push for that. I
was going to ask you, because of those comments that he made about Haiti and about African nations, how does that impact in negotiations right now?
Well, it just definitely makes them really dig in and become even more intransigent about, you know, potentially moving off of that and saying, hey, the onus is on you. You know, anytime that there's a, you know, some kind of comment like this, it basically liberates the Democrats to really dig in and potentially even force a shutdown because it's the right thing to do, given, again, those comments and kind of those principled positions.
Well, right now, President Trump doesn't want to see a shutdown coming up on his one-year anniversary of his presidency. So could we see Democrats and Republicans come together to maybe come up with a short-term spending fix until we can get a long-term spending bill?
That's going to be the most likely scenario, is that we're going to get something short-term And really the sticking point moving forward is going to remain, what do we do with the Dreamers? What do we do with this deferred action for childhood arrivals? And then additionally, and something we haven't even mentioned yet, is that the Trump administration, I think many Republicans are going to insist that there's more border security, and by border security, think wall.
Yeah.
And he's going to want to probably see something so that he can claim victory, even if it's a small amount, even if it's just maintaining something that's already there. He's going to want to be able to take to Twitter or look into the camera and say, I am getting the wall for us right now.
Very interesting conversation. We're back in a few. Thanks so much for watching Cincinnati Connection. We will see you all on next week.